If there, if there's anybody here who has not signed in yet for the congregational meeting, which is a separate sign-in from the service this morning, is there anybody? You just raise your hand because Sue's got a tablet for you. Sue, you got them all? Okay, I think we'll get going here. Welcome to the annual congregational meeting of Foothills Unitarian Church. I am Mary Kleekin, and I am the acting president of the Board of Trustees, and I called this meeting to order by asking Hudson Wilkins to light our chalice for us.
Can I get a quick show of hands for everyone who has had a 3-year-old wake them up way too early by tickling their feet? Just another quick show of hands in that same situation. Have you had your co-parent in cahoots with your child to do that? Okay. There's one. All right, thank you. That was my morning. All right, so we start our reading, chalice lighting, with a reading from Kat Leo, who's a congregant out of San Francisco, and starts with a reading or a quote from Jennifer Holliday. A lot of times we base everything just on our immediate circumstance. We don't see the big picture for our lives. We don't love ourselves. We don't have a way of kind of gauging the future, so we count it lost. And this is from Kat. Nowadays, my attitude towards driving is arguably a little too cavalier, but there was a time when the responsibility of steering a 3,000-pound metal cage gave me sweaty palms and heart palpitations. The first time I drove on the freeway was only at the insistence of my driving instructor, who thought that I was ready. I disagreed. Crawling along the I-80 at about 40 miles per hour, ignoring everyone behind us, I was able to stay in my lane only with extreme concentration and constant correction. Sensing that I was drifting too far to the right, I would turn the wheel leftward, and the car would drift too far to the left, forcing me to turn the wheel to the right, causing the car to drift right again, and so on. It probably only lasted a minute or two at most, but it felt like an eternity. Then my instructor said, "Look up." "What?" I countered. Couldn't he see that I was too busy looking at the lines so that I could keep the car within them and us alive? Look further into the distance. Right now, you're focusing only on what's 20 feet in front of you and overcorrecting. Look up and further out. Trust me. Gradually, I raise my gaze upwards, taking in the whole scene, where the road ahead was straight, where it curved, and how much. Almost magically, our car's movement smoothed out. I was driving on the freeway, staying in my lane almost effortlessly, needing to make only small adjustments. Broaden your focus. Oftentimes, I find myself focusing on the things immediately in front of me, and as a result, they may seem larger and more important than they actually are. When I remember to orient myself within the bigger picture, it recalibrates my perspective. I can better judge how important a problem is or isn't. And even if it is a big problem, I can better understand how to respond to it, and also remember the reasons I still have to be happy. And prayer. May we always keep in mind the bigger picture. May we always remember who we are, from where we've come, and where we want to go as we respond to life's challenges. May it be so. Amen.
My computer just went blank. We are a congregational denomination, which means each congregation is owned and governed entirely by its voting members. As Unitarian Universalists, we affirm the use of the democratic process, and we use Robert's Rules of Order to guide our meetings. We begin with an announcement of the quorum, followed by voting to approve the agenda and our standing rules. And I understand that we do have a quorum. So, good start. The agenda is up on the screen, and unless there are any objections, we will approve the agenda as presented in this slide. Throughout the meeting, if you do have an objection or a question, you can raise your hand either in person or there's some folks on Zoom. Seeing no objections, the agenda is approved. And next we have the standing rules. Again, they're up on the board, and they're the same standing rules that we've used for the last, I think, 7 years. So, unless they're... There it is, sorry. Okay, so you can take a look at those. Unless there's any objections, we'll approve the standing rules as presented in this slide. I wasn't going to read them, but if you'd like me to, I will. Number 1, members shall abide by the Foothills Covenant of Right Relations. Number 2, no member shall speak more than once in debate on the same question until all members wishing to speak have done so. 3, no member shall speak more than twice in debate on the same question. Number 4, comments made in debate shall be limited to a maximum of 2 minutes. And 5, any motions to amend must be submitted to the president or Zoom moderator before the motion is made. Are there any objections? Seeing none, the standing rules are approved. We have a covenant that we say every Sunday. In fact, we said it this morning during service, but we also have a covenant of right relations, which I'd like to read to you now. We covenant to build a religious community guided by love and sustained by respectful relationships, which work towards the greater and common good. Believing that building healthy relationships is a spiritual practice, we aim to listen appreciatively, speak with care, express gratitude, honor and value our differences, and assume good intentions. We will communicate directly, honestly, and compassionately, particularly when we are in conflict, and we will not expect to always get our own way. When we feel hurt or when we hurt others, we will try to forgive, make amends, and connect in a spirit of love. In celebration of the common purpose that unites us, we will do our best to abide by this covenant. The next thing on our agenda is a motion that was brought by the board. The motion is to approve the minutes of the congregational meetings in June of 23 and December of 23, as affirmed by the board and as presented in the congregational meeting packet. So I think the best way to vote would be just raising hands. So all in favor of this motion, raise your hand. Those opposed? Okay, the motion has passed. The next part of this is my report, and I am going to switch gears and move back here. I'll put this down a little bit. Six months ago, on the first Sunday of December, we moved into this beautiful new sanctuary. Through all the excitement of the occasion, I remember Gretchen saying that the new sanctuary was a dream held by this community for 15 years. That dream persevered and became reality because it was envisioned and fed by the belief that it could be done, by the belief in the generosity of this community, and by the resilience to overcome whatever obstacles happened to get in the way. For instance, a worldwide pandemic, among other things. Gretchen's next words were, okay, what's next? I think we will be living into the answer to that question for some time. It is, in fact, what visioning is all about. And visioning is a process that takes time and discernment. And it also takes those same values that brought us to be meeting in this sanctuary today. Those same core values, including an openness to what might be possible if we just dream big enough. It is truly an exciting time for us as a church community. So, what's next? The Board of Trustees has been focused during the past year on laying the groundwork for our next visioning process. For those of you who might not know what the board does, I want to take just a few minutes to go over what the primary board responsibilities are. There's a slide for that. Maybe? There we go. Number one, the board's responsibility is to articulate our values, our mission, and our vision. And of course, we do this through multiple conversations, both formal and informal, with you, the congregation, and other sources of accountability, such as the local Fort Collins community and the Unitarian Universalist Association. We are at about the 6th year of the 7-year visioning cycle. So we will be working in the next year or year and a half on articulating a new vision. Today's discussions at your tables a little bit later are a piece of this process. The board is inviting each and every one of you to participate in developing Foothills' vision of the future. And we need everyone's ideas. Whether you have been here 30 years, or 3 years, or 3 months, everyone, whether you're a member or a visitor or a traveler, we need everyone. Today is just one small but important piece, and we will continue to ask for your input in various ways throughout the year. The second responsibility of the board is governing through policy. Major updates and revisions to the policy manual and the bylaws were done by 2 previous boards, so our work in this area has been quite a bit less this year. If you want to look at the policy manual, it is on the website under the heading of governance. The third responsibility is monitoring compliance and monitoring compliance with policies. This is a continuous process that is done at every monthly board meeting. And we monitor to ensure that what we do is consistent with what we say we are doing. And fourth, linking to the future, connecting our internal and external sources of accountability, and the shorthand term for this that is linkage. The board has done a lot of work in this area this year, and will continue to develop relationships with our community partners, other churches, and other local agencies and organizations, as well as the UUA with its visionary leader, Dr. Sophia Benencourt. But again, what's next? Well, there are clues. We see glimpses, stirrings of what might be. All around us and within us, there are voices to be heard. Mostly, I think we may just need to be still and notice and listen and keep our minds and hearts open and do as Rainier Maria Rilke writes in his Letters to the Young Poet, live the questions now. Perhaps you will then gradually, without even noticing it, live along some distant day into the answer. And now, before I give the mic to Sean, I want to recognize the contributions of 2 board members who have completed their terms. Sean, I want to ask you if you could get the bags that are on your desk. Yeah, thanks. I would like to ask now Walter Nash and Linda Cathera to come up here. Walter served as our president from 2022 to 2023 and had to retire from the board for health reasons this past January. And because of that, we never had a chance to recognize him for stepping into the leadership position with such little notice that he had. And he did it with such grace and generosity. We are so grateful to you, Walter, for all that you have done for this church. Linda is completing her third year also on the board and has served as secretary most of that time. Linda has, besides taking lots and lots of notes, she has been a consistent and steady presence on the board, always with insightful contributions to our discussions. Thank you, Linda. Thank you. Thanks. And now I'm gonna turn it over to Sean.
I think I can use this one. You can keep the mic, Mary.
Okay.
Interrupt me if you think so. So usually Gretchen's up here giving this report. But Gretchen is enjoying some vacation time, which is one of the values that we have in our church, which is seeking sustainability and regeneration for ourselves. And so she's off enjoying some time. So I'm here. I think maybe my mic needs a little bit more volume. Does that work better? What about now? All right. So as I think about where we are right now, I've been gathering together with group leaders, and I've been asking them one question. I've been asking them, where have you seen deepening belonging, joyful resilience, and collective courage showing up? And there have been so many stories, small stories, big stories, but all of the stories feel like we are mid-shift. What I mean by that, and we can go to the next slide, is that we're in a space in which we are moving through a threshold, moving into the space, moving into our first summer. We're getting a grip on what church and life are like after a pandemic. We're also in this congregation really attuned to how precious life is. I mean, we've had 3 memorials in our community in the last 5 or 6 weeks. I know many of you attended, some, if not all of them. We're also inching closer and closer to an election. Did you notice that? And I know that for many of us, that might evoke senses of despair, dread, sense of denial, a sense of energy maybe. All of that asks us that question that Mary is inviting us to think about as a church, which is, what does our mission call us to do in this moment, in this place, with these people, when our values are on the line in so many different ways? And as I've been thinking about these stories, I've been thinking about the ways in which the 3 before statements can describe me on many days. Go to the next one. The amount of times that I feel isolated, powerless, and a sense of dread. But also the ways in which, through this community and through others, those senses of isolation, powerlessness, and dread can be transformed. So I want you to take a moment and turn to someone near you. We'll go to the next slide. I want you to share with them one moment that you've connected to this church in which one of these transformations has occurred for you. From isolation that becomes a deepening belonging, for a sense of powerlessness that becomes a collective courage, a sense of dread that becomes a joyful resilience. So take a moment, turn to someone close, and share one moment. You're good. You can place the mic there if you'd like. This is a little mic holder.
Oh.
So if you want to place it there, you can, but you're good either way. All right, I'm going to cut you off because I know it's not going to be enough time, because this is the conversation we're going to continue afterwards. But I want to hear someone shout out, when you think about deepening belonging, a moment or story that you had in which you felt that transformation.
Wellspring.
Going through Wellspring.
Choir.
What? Choir. Yeah. What else? Going through Braiding Sweetgrass, reading that together. What? The Sisterhood. Yeah. My Grandmother's Hands. Buckhorn Retreat. All of these. The coffee line. Is that what you said? Oh, talking to people in the coffee line. Wonderful. We had a newcomer the other day share with us this. They said, "We felt as if we arrived at a friend's house for a group gathering when we first arrived at Foothills. The thought that popped into my head during the first service we attended was, I'm home." That's the work that we're beginning. And these stories of deepening belonging are really what makes up who we are as a community. And what I've realized is that I know so few of the stories. And I think you might know so few of the stories too, because of the particular place that we show up in the church. And so that's why these visioning sessions are so important, because we get to start telling these stories. We start to get to hear each other's and get a different vision. Because zooming out helps us understand what's going on in our church. So I'm going to give you a little bit of data, because I like data, about what's going on in our church in terms of deepening belonging. So we can go to the next slide, and then the next one. So we and the staff have started to look at how people engage in the church from like a full spectrum of engagement in congregational life. We thought about what are the different ways that people might engage in church. They might come to worship. They might attend a group or event. They might find a place to serve. They may engage in our caring ministry, and they might be a part of our kind of financial generosity to support our church. And we started to just track how many people are engaged in these different ways. And if we go to the next slide, we can see that in the last 3 months, these are the number of types of engagement different members of our community have had. So newcomers, people who are showing up for the first time, generally do one thing. That makes sense, right? People who are seekers, and we think a seeker is someone who's done kind of 3 things. They've shown up 3 times. They've come to 3 different classes over kind of a period of time. They generally have done 1.8 of these things, which means they've come to worship and they've done something else. They've received caring connection. They have come to a class. Travelers, you might have seen that on your little paper. What does that mean? We think of travelers as people who could become members, but haven't. And travelers generally do 2.2 of these things, a little bit more. And our members, a little bit more than that. And when I was running this data, because I liked the data, what this showed me is that there is a path of deepening engagement that we are invited into as a church. And if we go to the next slide, what we see is these are unique individuals across the past 3 months who have done these different things. So you can show newcomers. We had 224 new people show up at worship for the first time in the last 3 months. 224, I know. I sometimes look out here and I'm like, who are you? And it makes sense that less of them are donating, attending, and serving and engaging in caring ministry because we don't know who they are. And then seekers, people who are kind of showing that pattern of engagement. We had 219 of them engaging in worship, 133 donating, 120 going to a class or a group, 8 of them serving in some way, and 11 of them receiving caring ministry. And I think that's a really important one, because that means you've just begun your journey with us and you're already connected to our caring ministries that Reverend Elaine and so many of you are a part of. All of this together shows that there's a robustness of how we are connected. And if we go to the next slide, you'll see of our members, when we look at these kind of categories, over 60% of our members are either highly engaged or engaged, which means they're doing more than just one of these things in a meaningful way. Actually, engaged and highly engaged is more than 2 of these things, which shows that our community is robustly engaged. If we would have run this data 9, 10, 20 years ago, it would have been really different in terms of how deeply people are connected to this place. And, there's some of our members who are engaged just in one way or are disengaged or not engaged at all. And that's both normal in terms of the cycles of life. We have snowbirds that go away and come back. We have folks that are really busy in their lives, caregiving. There's folks that are evaluating whether or not this continues to be their religious home. So that's a part of the shift. But what this shows me is that our community of members is really actively engaged. If we go to the next slide. And what we're starting to see is that more people are being attracted to be joining as partners in our church, which is really meaningful. The graph on the left-hand side there, right-hand side, whatever it is, the graph there, shows over the last few years kind of the net membership growth. And you can see from 2019 to 2023, we've had net negative growth in terms of members. Primarily, that's because, one, we didn't have really good, accurate membership rolls in the first place. Two, people moved away. Three, significant amount of people died. Four, we had a pandemic. And we had the lingering effects of the congregational transitions in various roles, and also playing out of kind of the misconduct disclosures that happened previously. But the trend you can see from 2022 forward is that we are having more and more people who are connecting with us. So we're making some headway. And what I'm seeing from our community is that we're starting to take a collective ownership of this work, which is to say that we're looking towards each other and we're saying, hey, you are acting like a member. Are you one? I had someone ask me today, I don't know if I'm a member. And I'm like, I knew they were a member. But I think these sorts of questions are the ones that we're starting to ask. We say, hey, you're showing up as a member. And when we think about a member, what we think about is someone who is committed to the partnership of this church, committed to partnering with us in this vision and making it real. And that takes all of us, because I don't know all the stories, you don't know all the stories, you don't know all the people, I don't know all the people, but the people that we are connected to, we have an obligation, I think, to invite them into meaningful engagement into the church life. And that's one of the work that we're trying to invite all of us to do. All right, we can go to the next one. Collective courage. Did someone have a story of collective courage they wanted to shout out? The AV booth. I think it is not only collective because it takes all of you. I think it is a leap of faith to trust the various circuits, circuitries, and systems that are set up to connect us to all the people. I ran the data. We have around 50 to 65 people that connect to us online every week. Watching services, just alone. They all make sure that connection happens. Anyone else have an example of collective courage?
The 69 people who signed up to be part of the intersectional action team.
Yes.
Within a day of offering that opportunity.
I was just going to talk about the intersectional action team. If you don't know about that, you should connect to Sue Taylor. But this is a group that's working to figure out how we can act on our values in the various spaces in our community. I think the intersectional action team is launching the letter writing club. Is that right? Is someone here? That's for the election, which is that an invitation to come before the services and write elections to voters in other parts of the communities, in other parts of the countries, inviting them to turn out to vote. Especially in communities in which ballot initiatives in which our values are on the line, or there's active work of voter suppression. Part of this is you the vote. It's part of the work. The next slide, thinking about collective courage, I hear from so many people about the ways that coming to worship reminds them that they're not alone. And if we look at the data in terms of how many people are showing up at worship, yellow is 2024. You can see that we have a significant more people that are showing up at worship if you look across the months than in previous years. We almost didn't build a big enough sanctuary. All right, next story. Who has a story of joyful resilience?
Rainbow Villages.
Yes, Rainbow. Do you want to tell what that is, Margie?
Sure. Well, it's just a collection of people that are trying to help, especially trans folks who might be fleeing from states that are creating laws against them, to
I'm going to repeat it, don't worry. So Rainbow Villages, Marty?
Could you have the microphone passed to the people who speak because
That would be a great idea.
hear what they're giving us?
That would be a great idea, and I'm going to stop asking for feedback in 2 seconds, but it would have been a good thing to have. Thank you. So Rainbow Villages is part of our justice work, part of our community building in which we are working to help relocate trans and non-binary people and their families from states in which they can't access the medical care or social supports that they could, or that they could in Colorado because of all the anti-trans laws. We have helped in the last year 11 people find homes in Colorado. Another way that I see us starting the work of joyful resilience is something that we as a congregation are going to be endeavoring to do for the first time in decades next year, which is that we are becoming a teaching congregation and we will have a ministerial intern. So I'm going to introduce you, if we go to the next slide, to Cheyenne, who's going to be our ministerial intern next year. Cheyenne is a candidate for UU ministry who's currently a chaplain resident at the University of Colorado Hospital in Aurora. Before moving to Denver, Cheyenne completed a Master's of Divinity, which is the degree you need to be a minister, at the school I went to, Harvard Divinity School. They've been around the country in different roles and has been a community organizer and is really excited to be a part of our community next year. They're going to be arriving in September, and we're going to be taking on this role as a community of forming the next generation of ministers within our community, which is something that I know I and many people are excited about. The thing I want you to leave you with is this sense that there are stories untold. Stories that we can get a sense of in data from big perspectives, but also stories that are micro moments in groups, in moments of service in the coffee line, any of these places. And as we're in this mid-shift in figuring out where we are and who we are, part of the work is to be listening for those stories intentionally and kind of knitting them together to see how they're forming a fabric of something greater.
Cheryl, don't know where you, oh, there you are. Come on up.
Hello, I'm Cheryl Hazlitt with the nominating committee. Our leader of the nominating committee, Christine England, is off in Ecuador, and Ben Manville is our other member who's out of town. But I'm here to what do I call this? I'm introducing the nominees for our upcoming slate of officers for this year. And for the board, we have Peter Moore. And Peter has had a long career in writing and editing. He and his wife, Claire McCrae, moved here in 2017. If you follow Peter, he does a lot of writing and has some stints with NPR and the Colorado Sun. But he says the best thing he and Claire ever did was to try out Foothills Unitarian Church, where they now know is the best in a long string of UU churches they belong to. This is an easy church to love, support, and help build for the future. And I don't see Peter out here. Is he out here? Is he on Zoom? He's out of town. Okay, he's out of town too. The other candidate for the board is Susan Williams. Susan, will you just stand and wave for a moment? Susan has been a Foothills member for 17 years. She's been involved in the church community, serving in family ministry, the caring hospitality and safe space teams, and as a worship host on Sunday morning. Susan has a background in special education and works with Poudre School District's early childhood program. Susan has been serving as an alternate on the board, and our vote will confirm her for her remaining term. The other candidate that we have is joining the nominating committee because Ben Manville will be exiting off, and that's Bonnie Insko. Bonnie, will you stand? And I'm really glad we gave her that applause. Bonnie has been a longstanding member at Foothills over 30 years. She has been involved in many aspects of our church life. She knows the history of this church and was one of the primary authors in the book. She led the, I'm sorry, let me say this. She led the Foothills History Project, resulting in the publication of Speaking the Truth in Love, the comprehensive book about the history of Foothills Unitarian Church. Bonnie, yeah. So, with that, that is the nominating committee's slate of officers that we recommend for voting to move forward in this year.
Thank you, Cheryl. Thanks. And so the motion is to accept the slate of nominees, and we'll do this with a hand vote again. All in favor of this motion? Thank you. Opposed? Great. We have a new slate of officers, and thank you to the nominating committee for their work on this. And also I want to recognize the coming board for the year 2024-25. So if you would stand up, Susan, Beth, John, Diana, Sue Bloomfield, Peter Moore's not here. Is that everybody? Yep. And me? All right, thank you. Vote is unanimous. Okay. This concludes the business of this congregational meeting, and we are adjourned. But first, I want to mention that we'd like you to return the information sheets with your any updated information that you might have for our records, and so there's another slide, I believe, and then let's see here. Yeah, there is more. There is more, and the more is our breakout sessions, and I'm sorry? Marty.
Yes. Before we conclude, is there any opportunity for people in the congregation to participate in the process of the board meeting? I don't have any particular concerns of my own, but other people have raised concerns that have not been addressed. How do we do that? How is the effective way for members to bring issues to the board so that they can respond to concerns? And I don't know that that process is very well understood by anybody.
Okay, well, first of all, the board meetings are open to the congregation. Anybody can come. They are on the calendar. Right now, they're the second Thursday of the month. Were you going to add something?
So, what time are they at?
Oh, 4:30.
So I think,
And is congregational members' commentary allowed? Are people allowed to ask questions? Can they participate?
Sure.
it's at the discretion of the chair of the board in terms of what it looks like for participation. Generally, if you're showing up at a board meeting, we'd love to hear your perspective and things. And, you know, depending on the type of the conversation, it can mean that there are things that are in the weeds in terms of what the board is working on that it may be hard to get you up to speed on in terms of you to be able to provide, you know, a lot of commentary on. But yes, you would be invited to speak.
If there is something that somebody wants to bring up, I would appreciate it if you would contact me, and then I can put it on the agenda if it's appropriate.
So I just say like high level in terms of if you have feedback, there's some different places to put it. The first thing is if it has to do with what we are doing in terms of church, the first person to contact is the staff lead who is in charge of that area. Because it probably is the case that the board is not directly dealing with the thing that you are most proximate to. The example I give often is music. If you have suggestions or concerns about the music ministry of the church, you should talk to, right now, Gretchen or the music person, because they are the ones that are directly overseeing that area of ministry. The board doesn't actually ever talk about music in the sense of what music are we doing at church, but they are asking questions like, do we have a vibrant worship experience here? Are we engaged in dialogue with our community about worship? Those are the questions that the board would be asking, but for the rest of it, it is a kind of a staff-led part of it. So you should connect to the staff. That being said, if you have concerns about policies, ethical issues, all of that of what's going on in the church, you should be first connecting to the board is a great place to start. They may direct you to a different place. Like, for example, if you think I'm breaking ethical codes, you should definitely reach out to the board, but they would probably direct you to Gretchen first as my supervisor. But yes, you could launch a grievance towards the board, and they would have a process of going through and evaluating and working through that feedback.
And there's a board email address.
There is a board email address. It is theboard@foothillsuu.org. So if you ever are confused about how to contact the board, email theboard@foothillsuu.org, and it goes to everyone on the board, and Gretchen and I, because we are both on the board. And so we hear that feedback, and then the board member will reach out to you and say, hey, we received your feedback. But it could be that they don't actually have jurisdiction on it because it isn't about policy, it is about monitoring, it isn't about linking to the future or any of those things that Mary talked about. So they might direct you somewhere else.
Okay. Walter, do you have a question? Okay. Could we go to the next slide? Return your information sheet, and then one more slide.
There's a basket out there.
Yes. So the potluck, please get your food and sit with folks that you might not know. Just try to mix it up with some folks that you have never met before. There is a facilitator for each table who's going to lead the discussion, and they'll probably ask if somebody is available to be a scribe for that group. Thank you for coming, and the facilitators should meet at the welcome table, and everybody else go for the food.
If you have kids and you are staying, you're invited to get them food, bring it to the playground, or invite them to come sit with you at the table, whatever works for you.
And those on Zoom can start their discussion,
Thank
I
you,
think,
everyone.
right now. Thank you.